The first glance rain had a different sound in Edinburgh. Not the warm summer rain that washed streets clean and disappeared with the sunrise. This rain lingered. It clung to the ancient stone buildings and whispered through the narrow alleys like a secret the city refused to forget. Elena Moreau had always loved that sound, perhaps because it matched the emptiness inside her. At 26 years old, she lived alone on the fourth floor of an old Victorian apartment building near the edge of the old town. The wallpaper peeled at the corners. Pipes groaned in the walls after midnight, and every winter evening fog crawled along the streets outside her windows, like pale ghosts searching for a way home. Most people hated the loneliness of Edinburgh in late November. Elena wore it like a second skin. She worked as a freelance street photographer, though worked was a generous word. Some months her photographs sold well enough to keep the electricity running. Other months she survived on black coffee and stale bread while pretending not to notice overdue bills gathering on the kitchen table. Still, photography gave her something sleep no longer could, a reason to wander. That night, the rain began just after 8. Thin at first, then heavier, cold enough to sting her cheeks. Elena wrapped her dark coat tightly around herself, grabbed her old Leica camera, and stepped into the city. The streets glowed gold beneath old lanterns. Reflections shimmered across wet cobblestones. Couples hurried beneath umbrellas while distant church bells echoed somewhere beyond the mist. Beautiful, lonely, alive. She walked without direction, letting instinct guide her through narrow alleys and hidden stairways tourists rarely noticed. Her camera clicked every few minutes. A lonely cafe window, a cigarette burning in trembling fingers. An old violinist beneath an archway. Moments. Fragments. Proof that people existed before vanishing again. Near midnight, Elena reached Victoria Street. The rain had grown heavier there. Water streamed along the curved road, while neon lights blurred against the fog. That was when she saw him. At first he looked like nothing more than another silhouette standing beneath the rain. Tall. Still. Dressed entirely in black. No umbrella. No movement. He stood at the far end of the street beneath a flickering lamp, his face hidden in shadow. Elena slowed slightly. Something about him felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly. Just unnatural. People shifted constantly in the cold. They checked phones, adjusted coats, rubbed hands together. But this man stood perfectly motionless despite the freezing rain soaking through his clothes, watching. Her fingers tightened around the camera strap. She told herself not to be ridiculous. The city was full of strange people, yet a strange heaviness settled inside her chest. The kind that arrives before fear fully understands itself. Elena looked away and continued walking. She tried focusing on the rhythm of her boots against the wet stones, but after several seconds, curiosity pulled at her again. She glanced back. The man was still there, still watching. A passing bus crossed between them for half a second. Its headlights flooded the street with white light, and when it passed, the man was gone. Elena stopped walking. The street behind her stood nearly empty now, except for rain and drifting fog. Her stomach tightened. "Get a grip," she whispered to herself. The words dissolved into cold air. She continued home, but for the rest of the walk she could not shake the feeling that someone was behind her. Not close. Far enough away to remain unseen, yet always there. Her apartment smelled faintly of dust and old books. Elena locked the door behind her, tossed her coat onto a chair, and set the kettle boiling. Outside rain tapped gently against the windows while the city faded into silence. She uploaded her photographs onto her laptop around 1 in the morning. Hundreds of images flickered across the screen. Streetlights, faces, reflections. Then, she froze. One photograph showed a narrow alley she barely remembered taking. At the far end of the frame stood the man in black. Small, blurred slightly by rain, but unmistakable. Elena leaned closer. A strange chill crawled across her arms. She opened another photograph from later that night. Again, there he was. Different street, different angle, always distant, always watching. Her mouth felt dry now. She checked a third image. Nothing. A fourth. Nothing again. Elena exhaled, shakily embarrassed by her own paranoia, until she opened the fifth photograph and saw him once more, standing behind a group of strangers near a tram station. Exactly the same posture, exactly the same dark silhouette. A knot tightened deep in her stomach. She zoomed in. The image distorted into grains of digital noise, but she could still make out one detail clearly: his face. Or rather, the absence of one. It was too dark beneath the hood to distinguish any features at all, as though light itself refused to touch him. Elena shut the laptop abruptly. The apartment suddenly felt colder. Too quiet. She poured herself tea with trembling hands and forced herself not to look toward the windows. This was absurd. Some random man happened to appear in a few photos. That was all. Still, when she finally went to bed near 3 in the morning, she locked her bedroom door. For the first time in years, the following days were worse. Not dramatically. Not enough to explain logically. Just enough to make her uncomfortable. She saw him across the street Tuesday morning while buying cigarettes. A tall figure beside a newspaper stand. When a taxi passed between them, he vanished again. Wednesday evening, Elena noticed him reflected faintly in the train window during her ride home. She spun around immediately. Nobody. Thursday night, she saw him standing at the end of her apartment hallway, motionless beneath the flickering light. She blinked, and an elderly woman stepped out from the shadows, instead staring at Elena with confused irritation. Sleep became impossible after that. Every creak in the building sounded like footsteps. Every passing shadow looked human. By Friday, dark circles had formed beneath her eyes. "You look awful," her friend Clara told her over coffee. Clara worked at a small art gallery near Princess Street and was one of the few people Elena still spoke to regularly. "I haven't slept much." Again, Elena hesitated, then laughed quietly. A forced sound. "You ever get the feeling someone's watching you?" Clara raised an eyebrow. "That sounds concerning." "I'm serious. You're also a photographer who spends nights wandering dark streets alone, listening to depressing French music." Elena managed a faint smile. Fair point. But even as Clara talked, Elena's attention drifted toward the cafe window. Rain slid slowly down the glass, and beyond it, a dark silhouette stood across the street. Her heart stopped. "There," she whispered. Clara turned immediately. What, the man outside? But the sidewalk beyond the cafe was empty. Only umbrellas and blurred headlights moved through the rain. Clara looked back at her carefully now. "Elena, I know how this sounds. You need sleep." Maybe she was right. Maybe grief was finally catching up to her. Her mother had died 8 months earlier after a long illness, and since then, Elena's world had become strangely hollow. Some mornings she woke, unable to remember why she should leave bed at all. Perhaps exhaustion was twisting shadows into monsters. She wanted to believe that, desperately. That night, Elena walked home earlier than usual. The city was quieter, now wrapped in fog thick enough to swallow entire buildings whole. Her boots echoed against wet stone. 1 step, 2, 3. Then, another sound behind her. Soft, measured. Footsteps. Elena slowed. The footsteps slowed too. Cold fear spread slowly through her body. She kept walking. Faster now. The sound continued. Not close. Never close. But always matching her pace. Her breathing became uneven. "Don't look back." The thought arrived suddenly and irrationally, yet she obeyed it. Streetlights blurred as she hurried through the mist. Her chest tightened painfully while the footsteps continued somewhere behind her. Steady, patient, waiting. At last, Elena reached her apartment building. Hands shaking violently, she unlocked the entrance door and stumbled inside. Silence. The footsteps were gone. She leaned against the wall, breathing hard, then slowly turned toward the glass entrance behind her. The street outside stood empty beneath the rain. No figure, no movement, nothing. Elena almost laughed from relief, until she noticed something else. A small photograph lying on the floor just inside the doorway. She frowned. It was one of her photographs. One she had taken 3 nights earlier. Her blood turned cold, because on the back of the photograph, written in elegant black ink, were 4 simple words: "I still remember the fire." Elena stared at the sentence without breathing. Then her eyes drifted toward the image itself, toward the distant silhouette hidden deep in the rain, watching her, standing exactly 27 steps behind. The man in the photographs. Elena did not sleep that night. She sat on the floor of her apartment with the photograph in her hands, staring at the words on the back until they no longer looked like language. "I still remember the fire." The sentence should have meant nothing. There had been no fire in her life, at least none she remembered clearly, and yet the moment she read it, something ancient and buried shifted inside her chest. Not a memory, not exactly, more like the echo of a scream heard through stone walls. Outside, Edinburgh continued to rain. The city pressed itself against her windows in long silver streaks, and the apartment seemed to breathe around her. The pipes groaned. The old wood settled. Somewhere above, a neighbor moved across the ceiling with slow, tired steps. Elena remained still. At dawn, she finally stood and locked the photograph inside a drawer. Then she unlocked it again 5 minutes later. She could not leave it hidden. She could not bear to look at it either. By 8 in the morning, pale winter light filled the room, turning every shadow thin and gray. Elena made coffee and drank it standing beside the sink. Her hand shook so badly the cup rattled against her teeth. She opened her laptop. If the man had appeared in one photograph, perhaps he had appeared in others. At first, she only searched through the images from the last week. He was there. On Monday, beside the stone steps, near the Royal Mile. On Tuesday, reflected in the dark glass of a closed bookshop. On Wednesday, across the street from the tram stop. Always distant. Always dressed in black. Always facing her. Elena's breathing became shallow. She began opening older folders. October. September. August. The screen filled with streets, rain, strangers, cafes, churches, faces she had forgotten. And there, hidden in the corners of her own life, was the same shadow. Sometimes he was almost impossible to see. A shape behind a bus window. A dark figure at the end of an alley. A reflection in a puddle. But once she noticed him, she could not unsee him. By noon, Elena had stopped blinking. She opened a folder from the spring. Her mother's funeral. She had not looked at those images since the day she took them. The churchyard had been covered in soft rain. Black umbrellas. White flowers. Clara's arm around her shoulders. Her mother's coffin lowered into the ground while Elena stood motionless, too empty to cry. And behind the line of mourners beneath an old yew tree, there he was, the man in black. Elena made a sound that was not quite a sob. She closed the laptop and pushed it away, as though it had burned her. For several minutes, she simply sat there, one hand over her mouth, eyes fixed on the blank wall. This was impossible. A stalker could follow her for days, maybe weeks, but not months. Not through private grief. Not into photographs she had taken before she ever noticed him. Unless he had always been there. The thought made the room tilt. Elena grabbed her phone and called Clara. Her friend answered on the 4th ring. "Elena, are you all right?" "No," Elena whispered. "I need you to come over." There was a pause. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. When Clara arrived, she found Elena sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by printed photographs. Her face changed immediately. "My God," Clara said softly. "You look like you haven't slept." Elena pointed at the pictures. "Look." Clara removed her coat slowly and sat down. Elena showed her everything. The rainy street, the tram station, the funeral, the reflection, the photograph with the message written on the back. Clara's expression shifted from concern to unease. "Elena, you see him, don't you?" Clara picked up the funeral photograph and held it near the window. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she nodded. Yes. The single word almost broke Elena, because it meant she was not imagining it. "Who is he?" Clara asked. "I don't know." "And this message? The fire?" Elena shook her head quickly. There was no fire. Clara watched her carefully. "Are you sure?" The question irritated her more than it should have. "Of course I'm sure." But even as she said it, something flashed behind her eyes. Orange light. Smoke. A child coughing. Elena stood so suddenly her chair scraped against the floor. "I need air." "Elena, wait." But she had already grabbed her coat. The city outside was bright in the cruel way. Winter mornings sometimes are when sunlight appears without warmth. Elena walked fast, not knowing where she was going. Clara followed close behind, calling her name, but Elena could not stop. She felt as if her own mind had become a locked room, and something inside was knocking. They ended up at a small police station near the city center. Elena did not remember deciding to go there. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed. A young officer listened while Elena explained the photographs. He was polite, but his eyes carried the familiar softness people used when they thought someone was unstable. Clara placed the printed images on the desk. The officer studied them. His expression became more serious. "You're saying this same individual appears in all of these?" "Yes," Elena said. "And you don't know him?" "No." He nodded slowly. "We can make a report. Do you have any security cameras near your building?" "My entrance does." "Then we'll request the footage." For the first time all day, Elena felt a small thread of relief. Reality had rules. Cameras recorded what eyes missed. If the man had followed her, the footage would show him. If he had left the photograph, it would show that too. By evening, Clara stayed with Elena at the apartment while they waited for a call. She made tea, neither of them drank. The rooms grew darker. Rain returned. At 7:02 p.m., the officer called. Elena answered immediately. His voice was careful. "We reviewed the building footage from last night, and there is no man." Elena closed her eyes. "What do you mean the camera shows you entering the building alone? No one comes in after you. No one leaves the photograph. That's not possible. There is something else." Elena gripped the phone tighter. "The footage shows you stopping inside the entrance, bending down and picking something up, but the camera angle doesn't show the object clearly." "My photograph. Possibly. But who left it?" A pause. "No one on the footage." The room seemed to fall silent around her. After the call ended, Clara stared at her. "What did he say?" Elena lowered the phone. "He said no one was there." Clara's face drained of color. That night, Clara refused to let Elena sleep alone. They sat together in the living room with every lamp turned on. Near midnight, Clara finally dozed off in the armchair. Elena remained awake. At 2:17 a.m., the hallway floorboards creaked. Elena's eyes lifted to the door. Another creak. Slow. Deliberate. A footstep. Then another. She stood carefully. The apartment felt frozen. She moved toward the door, each breath quiet and painful. Through the peephole, the hallway stretched dim and empty. But at the far end, beneath the flickering light, stood the man in black. Elena stopped breathing. This time he was closer. Not 27 steps. Maybe 15. His head was slightly lowered, his face hidden beneath the hood. Elena Clara's voice behind her made Elena flinch. The figure in the hallway lifted its head. For one terrible second, Elena felt he was looking directly through the door, through the wood, through her skull. Then the light flickered, and he was gone. Clara rushed to her side. "What is it?" Elena opened the door, before fear could stop her. The hallway was empty, but on the floor lay another photograph. This one was old, faded, bent at the corners. Elena picked it up with trembling fingers. A little girl stood in front of a narrow house, smiling shyly at the camera. Beside her stood a younger boy with pale hair and serious eyes. They were holding hands. Elena stared at the girl. It was her, 9 years old. Her throat tightened. She turned the photograph over. On the back, written in the same elegant black ink, were 6 words. "You left him behind, Elena." A sound escaped her mouth. Clara read the words over her shoulder. Who is he? Elena could not answer. Because the memory came then. Not fully. Only in fragments. A staircase filled with smoke. A locked door. Small fists pounding wood. A boy screaming her name. Elena dropped the photograph. The apartment spun. Clara caught her before she hit the floor. For a moment, Elena was no longer 26 in a cold flat in Edinburgh. She was 9 years old again. Barefoot on burning floorboards. Smoke clawing her lungs. Her little brother crying from the room behind her. And in her hand, a key. Then the vision vanished. Elena gasped awake on the sofa. Clara kneeling beside her with terrified eyes. "Elena, talk to me." Elena sat up slowly. "My brother," she whispered. Clara frowned. "You never told me you had a brother. I didn't remember." The words sounded insane, but they were true. Somewhere deep inside her life, a door had been sealed shut, and now someone was opening it from the other side. The next morning, Elena went to the public records office. Clara begged to come, but Elena refused. Some truth had to be faced alone. It took 3 hours of searching through old files, death records, and newspaper archives before she found it. A small article from 17 years ago. Fire claims young boy in Leith home. The photograph beside the article showed a burned house. Elena covered her mouth. The victim's name was listed beneath. Noah Moreau. Age 7. Survived by sister Elena Moreau. Her vision blurred. Noah. The name struck her like a bell in an empty cathedral. She remembered his laugh, his cold hands, the way he used to follow her everywhere, always behind her, always trying to keep up. Elena printed the article with numb fingers and left the building as rain began falling once more. She did not go home. Instead, she walked without thinking, following a road that seemed to know her better than she knew herself. By the time she looked up, she was standing before an abandoned train station on the edge of the city. Its windows were broken, its doors chained, its platform swallowed by weeds and mist. And there, beneath the rusted clock, stood the man in black, waiting. Elena should have run. Instead, she stepped through a gap in the fence and walked toward him. Her heart hammered so hard it hurt. The man did not move. Rain slipped from his hood in thin silver threads. When she stopped a few steps away, the air between them felt colder than winter. "Who are you?" Elena whispered. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he lifted his head. The hood fell back. Elena's body went rigid. The face beneath it was pale, gaunt, older than it should have been. But she knew those eyes. She had seen them in the old photograph, in the newspaper, in a childhood she had buried beneath years of silence. "Noah," she breathed. The man looked at her with terrible sadness, and when he spoke, his voice was soft, distant, and full of smoke. "You finally remembered me." The distance between us, Elena could not move. The abandoned station seemed to hold its breath around her. Rain fell through the broken roof in thin silver lines, striking the cracked platform like quiet applause from something unseen. Weeds trembled between the stones. The rusted clock above them remained frozen at 2:17, its black hands pointing toward a moment that no longer belonged to time. Before her stood Noah. Not the little boy she had buried in the darkest room of her mind, but a man shaped from memory, smoke, and grief. His face was pale beneath the hood, older than death should have allowed. Yet his eyes were still the same soft, wounded, impossibly familiar. "You finally remembered me," he said. Elena's lips parted, but no words came. The name had torn open something inside her. Noah, her brother, her shadow, the child who used to follow her through narrow streets with his small hand clutching the sleeve of her coat. The boy who feared thunder, who laughed whenever pigeons scattered, who once told her he would follow her anywhere because she was the bravest person in the world. And she had left him behind. "No," Elena whispered. "No, you're not real." Noah looked at her with a sadness so deep it felt older than the city itself. "I was real once." The words struck harder than a scream. Elena stepped back. Her heels slipped on wet stone, but she caught herself against a rusted pillar. "I was 9, she said, though she did not know whether she was defending herself or begging forgiveness. "I was just a child. I know. I didn't understand what I was doing. I know." Her breathing broke. "Then why are you here?" Noah looked beyond her, toward the tracks disappearing into fog. "Because you kept walking away." The station blurred through her tears. Thunder rolled above Edinburgh, low and distant like a carriage crossing a bridge in another world. Elena pressed her hands against her temples as the memories came faster now. No longer fragments, but a flood. The house, in Leith. The smell of rain on old wood. Their mother asleep downstairs after another long shift. A candle burning too close to the curtains. Orange light blooming like a flower of hell. Elena remembered waking to smoke crawling beneath her bedroom door. She remembered coughing, screaming, for Noah running barefoot into the hallway. She remembered finding him Way Nation. Remembered finding him behind the nursery door crying, terrified, clutching his stuffed rabbit. Then the staircase burning. Their mother shouting from below. Elena had taken Noah's hand. They had run. But halfway down the hall a beam collapsed. Fire burst between them. Noah screamed. Elena stumbled backward into the small storage room, pulling him with her, or trying to. He fell. His hand slipped from hers. She reached for him. Smoke blinded her. Heat peeled the air from her lungs. And then the door. She remembered the key in her hand because she had hidden there before during their parents' arguments when shouting became too loud and the world too cruel. She remembered closing the door against the smoke, against the fire, against Noah's screams. Not forever. Just for a moment. Just until she could breathe. Just until she could think. But children do terrible things when terror becomes larger than love. The lock clicked. Noah pounded on the other side. Elena, please. She had dropped the key. She had crawled beneath a broken window. She had survived. He had not. A sob tore out of her. I tried to go back, she whispered. Noah said nothing. I did, she said louder, now desperate. I tried. I couldn't find the key. I couldn't see. I couldn't breathe. I know. Then why, she cried. Why did you follow me? Why show me those photographs? Why make me remember? At last, Noah looked at her again. I did not make you remember. You were already remembering. Every night, every photograph, every empty street. You kept searching for something behind you, Elena. The rain grew heavier. Elena shook her head. I thought you were haunting me. No, Noah said softly. I was waiting. For what? For you to stop running. Silence settled between them. Elena looked down at her hands. They were shaking pale and wet beneath the station's weak light. These were the hands that held cameras, locked doors, made tea, touched old photographs. These were the hands of a woman who had survived by forgetting. But forgetting had not saved her. It had only left Noah standing forever in the rain. I don't deserve forgiveness, she said. Noah's expression changed then, not into anger, but pain. Forgiveness is not something the dead can force upon the living. Then, what do you want? He raised one hand and pointed toward the far end of the platform. There, beyond the fog, a weak glow appeared. At first, Elena thought it was a train, but no sound followed. No engine. No metal shriek. Only light, warm and golden, spilling softly across the tracks. In that light, she saw the old house. Not burned, not ruined. Whole again. A narrow doorway stood open. Inside it, a little boy waited. 7 years old. Pale hair. Serious eyes. A stuffed rabbit held against his chest. Elena covered her mouth. Noah stood both beside her and inside that light, as though memory and death had split him in two. You have carried me as fear, he said, but I was your brother before I became your ghost. Elena took one step forward. The platform seemed to stretch. Another step. Her body trembled. She counted without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. Each step felt like crossing years of silence. 4, 5, 6. The golden doorway remained ahead. Behind her, the city vanished into rain. 7, 8, 9. She heard Clara's voice somewhere far away calling her name. Perhaps in the real world. Perhaps in memory. Perhaps not at all. 10, 11, 12. Elena began to cry. Not with fear now, but with the grief that had been waiting since childhood. It came raw and endless. A sorrow too old for language. 13, 14, 15. Noah, she whispered. The boy in the doorway lifted his head. 16, 17, 18. I'm sorry. The words were too small. Nothing could make them large enough. 19, 20, 21. I left you. 22, 23, 24. I was scared. 25, 26. She stopped. One step remained. The little boy looked at her from the doorway. And for the first time, Elena saw not accusation in his eyes, but loneliness. She stepped forward. 27. The station disappeared. For one impossible second, Elena stood inside the burning house again. Smoke filled her lungs. Fire roared around them. Noah was on the other side of the door crying. But this time she did not run. This time she found the key. This time she opened the door. Noah fell into her arms, small and shaking, and Elena held him with all the strength she had never had at 9 years old. I'm here, she whispered. I'm here now. The flames bent away from them. The smoke lifted. The house dissolved into golden dust. And Noah, the child in her arms, looked up at her with wet eyes. I was never angry forever, he said. Then he smiled. Just once. Like sunlight through rain. When Elena woke, she was lying on the platform of the abandoned station. Morning light had begun to seep through the broken roof. The rain had stopped. Her coat was soaked. Her hands numb, her throat raw from crying. Clara was kneeling beside her. Elena, she sobbed. Oh God, Elena, I found you. I found you. Elena blinked slowly. How? Your phone location. You didn't come home. I thought Clara broke off, wiping tears from her face. I thought something terrible happened." Elena sat up with Clara's help. The station was empty. No man in black, no golden light, no little boy. Only weeds, rainwater, and silence. For a moment, Elena felt a terrible grief rise again. Then she saw it. On the wet stone beside her lay an old photograph. The same childhood picture. Elena and Noah standing before the house holding hands. But it had changed. In the photograph, the little boy was no longer looking solemnly at the camera. He was smiling. Elena touched his face with trembling fingers and began to cry again quietly this time. Clara did not ask questions. She only held her. Weeks passed. Elena told the police she had been exhausted, confused, grieving. They accepted the explanation with practical kindness. Clara stayed with her for several nights. Slowly, the apartment became less haunted. The lights seemed warmer. The hallway no longer stretched like a tunnel into nightmares. Elena stopped wandering the streets at midnight. For a while, she stopped taking photographs altogether. Then, one evening, as winter softened toward spring, she picked up her camera and walked through Edinburgh again. The city was still old, still lonely, still full of rain. But something had changed, or perhaps something had finally been laid down. She photographed a young boy chasing pigeons near the cathedral, a woman laughing under a red umbrella, a violinist playing beneath an archway while evening light turned the stones gold. When she returned home, she uploaded the images. One by one, they appeared on the screen. No shadow stood behind her. No man in black waited at the end of the street. Elena exhaled. Then she opened the final photograph. It showed her own reflection in a shop window. Behind her, the street was empty. Almost. At the very edge of the frame, barely visible beneath the rain, stood a small boy in an old-fashioned coat. Not frightening, not watching with sorrow. Simply standing there, smiling. Elena stared at the image for a long time. Then she smiled back through her tears. Outside, somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang once. And for the first time in 17 years, Elena did not look behind her in fear. She looked behind her with love.